Here, welcome to Roleplay Cafe. I thought I'd take a second to talk about, well, for lack of a better term, maybe theater of the mind, ethics in roleplay, uh, and a little bit about how Dark Age Man tries to alleviate some of the pitfalls of that style uh, comparatively to traditional play, especially with maps and minis. Because maps and minis does afford you a certain amount of information that theater of the mind doesn't. Let's be honest. Uh, but it keeps you engaged in a different way that theater of the mind doesn't attempt to engage you. This style of play isn't meant to be that way. There's a reason it was created. Traditional play, the GM lays out the landscape, whether it's inside of a dungeon or a terrain. You'll see the dimensions. You see with the minis where you're located, where your comrades are located, where the adversary is located. This distances, areas of effect. You can all measure this out. Your turn, how fast your movement rate is, hit points. You take all this relevant, pertinent information that you see, this observable, this visual representation of it, measurably visible. And then you could take that, even though that field is not static, there's going to be changes on it, according to the initiative. And so as it changes, you make adjustments and then you choose whatever path that would be more advantageous, allow you more benefits as your character to have an effect on the field. In this case, the field of battle. So whenever you're playing, you gather that information. It keeps you in a mindset of more of a tactical situation. And not to say that anybody in this situation wouldn't be going to, a battle mode, as it were. But this is an abundance of information that you're readily, eagerly, and I would suggest more so available than a situation that might afford somebody in a real tactical situation, because you can only see from that vantage point. You can't see down onto the whole battlefield, right? So you're isolated in that just from your perspective on the battlefield. Okay, so it allows you a lot more information that you can then take that data and then process it and decide what to do. All right. Theater of the mind doesn't tip to replicate that. It pulls you a little bit away from that more so tactical, mechanical, mathematical mindset, and puts you a little bit more solidly in the shoes of the character, and the information that is afforded you by the GM is maybe your relative position to your comrades and the distance to the adversary. The distance you can shoot the bow. Is he far enough away? There's a series of questions that's typically asked in these encounters from the players to GM, to where it's filled out to where everybody gets kind of a rough estimate of what's happening. And then they make their decisions on what they want to do. All right. That's all good and fine in the experience. I mean, a lot of, I would say, tips and tricks to do this is you got to be cognitively aware of the narrative descriptions going along at the table, from the other players to the GM describing what's going on, whether something has happened simultaneously or not, or whether, you need to know what somebody's attempting as far as your character's ability to see, not metagame it, but, within their peripheral or their field of vision, how it may affect them, and you play off of that to some extent, and may be able to. So you have that. So you have to pay attention to that. There is situations I've been in, like at times where I didn't. There was one situation in particular where I thought that the adversary was closer, and so I reacted, and everyone else knew that the adversary was further away, including the GM. So since I already did my action, then I found out it was going to take me 2 rounds to get there. I stuck my neck out too far. I stuck out like the store's thumb, but I had already did what I did, and it put the the rest of the party at a detriment, and the fact that they were having to react in the wake of my action. All right, so there's situations like that that can develop because of a loss of information, right, through translation. So we're there, and so you have to be readily aware. You know, that's a portion of some of the translation to when you start playing theater of the mind. That you're going to be aware of that. I think some people, I think, as an aside, they get the notion that you play theater of the mind, you should be, or in character as character rather, that you're speaking simply what you do, and not so much narratively describing what you do. But narratively describing what you do is key and important to show how you're interacting with the world at large. It shows the other characters what you're doing, and so they can act off of you. Now I'll switch gears a little bit and go into like some of the things overall that we try to address with theater of the mind play to make it more fluid in Dark Age of Man, and kind of sidestep, circumvent falling into one of those uh, pitfalls. Um, for one, if we're in a situation, say it's a combat situation, now we have no initiative in Dark Age of Man. There could be sometimes this is easily resolved in a situation. You may have an old merchant there and a young spry warrior. Just through descriptive narrative and representation of characters by the players, where the leaning is going to be if you have an adversary come up this threatening the party physically. I say, especially if he's in closer proximity to the young spry warrior, who's going to jump at him first, right? So the response is going to be in accordance to the character. So the initiative, that character, the players playing that character may jump first, where the other one playing the old merchant may recoil. Okay, so that the character may determine the set of initiatives or who might respond to certain situation. I mean, if it was in reverse, a situation where there was bargaining over, uh, some kind of a legal issue or a monetary issue or something like that, then you might have the old merchant speak up and the young, spry, ill-equipped warrior would shut his mouth. So that may determine it, or it may be totally situational, to where, when something evolves in the theater of the mind in front of the group, then somebody may react first and then somebody reacts off of somebody, because there's always a situation where it may be better to alley-oop in a way, or what I mean by that is play off of somebody else's action. You know what I mean? If somebody distracts somebody else by getting their attention, then you can, jockey around a position to where you flank them as a character. So whatever your capacity for play is as your character, you're going to express it in the situation as it evolves. Right? It's a little bit like hot potato play, because as we see it go down live at the table organically, and people start to respond. There's never been a situation where people don't yield to others who might be reacting first. It's almost like when you say and you see it going down in theater of the mind and you react, there hasn't been any, to my recollection, any kind of confrontation about, no, I'm going first. It isn't built that way. It's it naturally evolves at the scene, on the scene, and there's never a point to where you can't capitalize on somebody else's movement and do something like that. So you're engaged with what I call like the narrative mechanic. You're gathering that information about what's occurring, and then you're playing off of that information. This also affords And what I would say, a tip when you're playing in theater of the mind is to yield to other players. It's not a single story. There's multiple stories going on here, or multiple organically evolving situations that will result in an end story for every character at the table, right? So there's not a single situation here that we're following. Uh, Multiplicity of situations, and so there's always enjoyment about responding, the call and response of characters off of each other and off of the presenter's representation of the NPCs and the world at large. You play off of that. You respond in kind, and then you're engaged. This ties back with engagement of the world. A lot of times, whenever somebody's presented, especially in a linear story path situation, where there's a monologue from the GM about what has occurred up to a certain point to get you there, it's a mixed bag at the table. There's people more so invested in the story and what's transpiring that the GM has laid out in front of them, and then others that are just waiting for the next combat and just wake me up when we get there, or I'll get off the phone when I get there. For the opposite extreme. So you got people, various degrees of engagement, and a lot of this in Dark Age of Man we try to remedy by not leading the path as a GM or storyteller. We're a presenter. We present the world and the NPCs and situations that occur, but the players direct their interest and their objectives and their desires. They get to play those out, so they get to express player agency more fully. They don't feel like it has to take a back seat until a certain instance, like maybe combat, to where they get to make a choice, right? So they're engaged more so readily and continually throughout the experience. So that benefits them in a way that they're more mindful of what is occurring from the presenter's words, narrative description, and words that are thrown their way. They're more keenly aware that they need to be attuned to that to make decisions and to play their character off of that. All that pertinent, readily available information that's coming their way. You need to yield, and you want to yield to other players and presenter to get that narrative information to base your reactions and decisions on. The same way, harken back to the earlier example of of seeing this information with the maps and minis. You gather this information. You want to yield. You're engaged. You drive the story, or you drive your situation, objective, or what have you, as a character with the party, uh, and interacting with others at the table. And there's a dynamic, there's a synchronicity that happens. It's a harmony. So everyone, in effect, kind of needs each other and feeds off of each other at the table. It's live and organic, and there's no, everything isn't just automatically taking care of you to where you can zone out and then wait for what to do. You're keenly aware and desired to have more information so it can inform you to what you need to do and what you want to express as a character via your own agency, as that character and the direction. So immediately it's gonna draw a person who might otherwise, in a different situation, just be sitting there waiting for. You have a tendency to sit there and wait for, when is it my turn? Because they get to be more so responsible and accountable for the character, and it's more dynamic. These are all from my words and my impressions and my years of playing the game and trying to hammer out how we do this thing, uh, as far as the style of play we're trying to achieve, which I think a lot of it is to alleviate some of the negative aspects that still traditional theater of the mind play is, because there's a lot of this still remnants of old linear styles, and it's just presented in the theater of the mind. We just springboard off the theater of the mind It gave it more so player agency. And when I say player agency, there's another aspect of like the ethics of how you're supposed to act and interact, is that you have an accountability as your character to represent your character, but also you can interact with the world uh, to a certain degree. There's boundaries, of course. If you're in a forest, you can probably easily say that you pick up a stick or you pick up a rock or what have you without, the presenter or GM saying, no, there's none, but he can, right? You could probably say something in a situation you find yourself in where there would be. If you're in a room, you may say you grab the curtain or whatever. Okay, yeah. There's situations where you can step beyond those bounds, and that's not warranted. And that's what I'll say, that that's when you cross those boundaries. There was an instance when years ago when I was playing a thief of some kind, and I said that there was a full moon out. Well, I narratively said that full moon was out, and I was a thief. I was trying to steal a little bit, I think, even narratively so, to where it would kind of set me up for a situation where I needed more visible light, even though it could have been detrimental as far as me being seen. But nevertheless, I needed to do that. All right. But GM called it and said, no, that's not what's happening. My bad. Retcon that. We'll go back. Right. Now, if I'd been playing a priest, I might not have been in the mindset to try to pull that. But there's some of the dangers of the narrative thing, to where you could take probably a little bit more so agency than you should. Especially when you're dealing with this not only happens with the world at large, which the presenter or the GM has control over. You're trying to extend that reach, but also with other players. If you try to hijack or piggyback or ride on the curtails of something that, this is a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. If you say you're doing something, assuming that somebody else is going to be kosher with what you're doing, by bringing them into your own personal agency and narrative of your character, and you're tagging them, especially if you're making an assumption about that they're okay with that or they're moving along there, that's crossing the boundary as far as like with the other players at the table. And it almost this is akin to what we do in Dark Age Man, where you want to yield, you want to find out what the other person's doing, and it's the call and the response is when you can play off of or springboard off of somebody. There's different, of course. I'm getting hit by different things in my head as far as like examples of what had previously occurred. I think there's the narrative danger of whenever you say something as far as being like purposeful and expressing what you visually see, because everybody sees through their own mind's eye, and it's going to be a little different than what the other player sees or the presenter sees, but everybody has to at least express what they're doing and how they're affecting the world and interacting with the world to a degree to where it's understood, and where everybody can somewhat make alterations to where they see things are going down around them, the other characters included. We were in the bowels of ship. David was running Jason and Todd and I through Barbarians of Lemuria. We were all chained chained up to the benches and rowing the oars. Well, when we finally broke free, I grabbed a section of that chain. Now I was further on down the line, say maybe Jason's character when he got rid, but I tore a section of the chain off. In my mind, the shackles around my wrist that had the chain in it, it came loose. So I tore the chain off, but didn't find out till two sessions later, the chain had become a narrative hindrance and to me. I mean, narratively to the whole party, in that it was rattling all the time, and unbeknownst to me, that they had envisioned that it was still shackled to it was still attached directly to the shackle on my arm, where I had envisioned it loose. And that's maybe a minute detail, but it becomes an issue whenever I'm fighting something. There's something can grab the end of that thing and pull me along with it instead of me being able to let go. So little things like that. It wasn't detrimental to some speed. It's just a little example about when you're narratively describing yourself, to be clear and concise and let that go. You know me, put it out there so everybody knows and understands. And then in Darcy's Man, we want people to be engaged and create a space to where you can't say please be engaged, but where it's naturally it gravitates toward people to be naturally engaged. And this is through increasing of agency and the necessity of wanting to get that information from other players to then determine what your response in kind is, right? So you become keenly aware of playing off of what other people are saying. So therefore, you just by default pay more attention to what's going on around you, and there's less of a tuning out, as it were, at the table. I've gone on for a little bit now and kind of maybe broken up a little bit, but just thought that that's some of the way that we try to approach Dark Age of Man, and I believe tried to streamline and make more in character as character play accessible, readily accessible, and address some of the things that may be disconnecting players from in character as character. And I really didn't mention in character as character all that much, but ultimately that was the goal. And Theater of the Mind is more of a position to where it's friendly toward in character as character play, you know, to be more fully realized, in that it doesn't take you out of that to put you in a different mindset of mechanics and mathematics and what have you, right? Which is fine. It's just different experiences. But to get there past that, to go Theater of the Mind, and then first you got to realize what you need to do to be more aware of the narrative, to make decisions and to understand your situational uh, position in the game to where you can respond. You need to be aware of what's going on, but then past that, to make somebody more so engaged to where they're less dismissive of information, or not so dismissive of information that goes past them. They need to be more so engaged and gather that information. We do that in Dark Age of Man, and we try to make it more friendly toward engagement, to where people have agency, and thereby it necessitates them pulling information to be able to respond in kind and give information back. And they yield to one another. No one's the center of attention. It passes from one to the other. It's a naturally occurring symbiotic relationship amongst the table, I've found through, years of playtesting. And anyway, I'll leave it there. But just some thoughts I was going through. And anyway, y'all take care. I'll talk to you later. Bye.